I guess to answer that, the first thing is digital transformation is one of these new buzzwords. So I guess it means slightly different things to different people. So to me, digital transformation is the use of data with modern technology to make a difference to process or people or organizations for their betterment. So in the banking sector where my experience has been, we've been using or trying to use digital technology ever since it came into being, really. So as the internet was launched in the early 90s, even using some of the basic techniques we had then. So my first digital project was using a software people laugh when I mention it, Windows 3.11 before it became Windows 95. We actually used to have rate sheets for auto loan salespeople, and they'd go around with these big folders of rates for customers in using various permutations and combinations. And then we created something with a vendor which allowed that to be done on a computer, irrespective of, at the time, if it was 3.11 or 95, which was a great technological innovation at the time, and went down very well. So in small degrees since then, we've been moving digital innovation forward. The exciting part of the market, of course, is now that everyone has a mobile phone, everyone has access to the digital world, everyone is becoming more aware of how powerful their data is. And the tools that have recently come to market and got more and more popular, the opportunities are boundless, and therefore the ability to take those forward and move on is really exciting. And I think while that is exciting in itself and gives rise to many possibilities, like with all big changes, there are a number of pitfalls as well, but I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. Well, I guess two or three that I've come across in my experience. One, of course, is associated with the whole concept of digital transformation, and that it is a goal in itself. I see digital transformation very much being a tool to get to an organizational outcome, not a goal in itself. The second element of digital transformation that I think a lot of people get wrong is that becoming digital is something that sits alongside your existing operation rather than integrated with it. And the third one is there's this fear, which I think the media has been hyping recently, that, digital is going to come and take your job. And I think those are the three myths that, if we consider them one at a time, should quite radically be debunked. I think digital is a tool. And like any other tool, it has to be used in the right way for the advantage of the organization. And that is one of the things I think some organizations in the past have got wrong. And they've tried to see digital as a goal in itself. And that's why they spent millions and millions of dollars and often not really achieve the outcomes they're looking for. The second one around running digital as a sort of adjunct to the organization rather than integrated with its legacy operations, I suppose is reacting to some of the new players that have come into the market, which didn't have that legacy operation and therefore were more fleet of foot. And legacy organizations have tried to copy that without sort of like throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And they're not sort of playing to their strengths. And in doing that are sort of caught between two different boats and end up in neither. And that's, of course, something they need to be careful of going forward. And the third one, like with any evolution, people's jobs changed. So, I mean, if we cast our minds back in history, when we moved from a primary to a secondary economy and secondary to tertiary, the nature of people's jobs changed. I mean, lots of articles talk about, hey, the Industrial Revolution changed the nature of people's jobs. The Internet Revolution is going to do likewise. So I think the important thing to remember is we need to harness how digital being a tool gets harnessed, used by people, and how that tool of better, more real-time and information being available at the moment can be used to interact better with customers, how organizations can manage their stakeholders better to get the results they're looking for using that digital tool. I think digital technology used right can be revolutionary. Digital technology is often referred to as a transformation. And I firmly believe a transformation is required where an organization hasn't been, or an industry, in fact, hasn't been evolving regularly. Because if industry was evolving as technology evolved, as cultures evolved, etc., there'd be no need for a transformation. But the reality of the world we live in today is, in many industries, there is need for transformation. And digital is a tool that is allowing us to look at how far away we are from the possible and try and upgrade that reality into transformation. While that sounds really exciting, and a very interesting analogy I read somewhere was, it's like a stable marriage and the attractiveness of a new relationship. Often people give up on that stable marriage for the excitement, and when they get into it, they find the grass was always looks greener on the other side. So organizations need to get into digital with their eyes wide open, and they need to do it the right way so that it's achieving an end goal. And they need to determine why they're doing what they want to do, how they're going to do it, and then what that will deliver, rather than the other way around. Well, I don't think that advice would be any different to an organization investing in any transformation, really. Any transformation, an organization needs to sit down and think about its strategy. Think about where that transformation fits in its journey to achieve that strategy, why they're undertaking it, get the communication right, and then go about assembling the team, empowering them, passing that message on, and making sure that the transformation is delivered sharp steps, each step that is able to pay for itself, so that there's payback, there's momentum, there's continued buying, and making sure you have enough time to evolve or change that strategy as you need to, as you go from step to step. So pretty much, change management 101. Any transformation project, the most important piece is to get it right at the outset. Is to define it correctly, make sure you've got executive buy-in, make sure you've got the communication right so your people buy into the transformation, they see the need for it, and then start to see real change that can be embedded. So again, this is going back to the basic principles of change management and why do changes go wrong. You have to start it right, make sure there is enough fuel in the tank to make sure people remain embedded to the idea of that change and continue to move it forward in short, sharp steps. I think a digital transformation needs 3 or 4 elements within the team. As I said earlier, it needs to tie in with the organizational strategy. Digital, by definition, has a lot to do with technology, but is about harnessing that technology for organizational change. So you need somebody right at the top of the organization who's bought into the need for this. It needs to align to your strategy. You need somebody who understands the new technology, working very closely together with somebody who understands your business. So to realize how that new technology could be harnessed for the organizational benefit that needs to come in back into the business, and therefore how it could be used to take that business forward. Often that change is not going to be small, and it's going to be quite culturally changing and challenging for the organization. So you need to factor that element of change into it. So any organization embarking on this needs to think carefully about the team. And rather than focus on technology, as many organizations seem to do, think about the wider aspects and bring in a partner who is able to appreciate that. It's like the ancient fable of the 6 blind men and the elephant. It's very easy when looking at an organizational change to look at the part that's staring you in the face and come up with the wrong conclusion. So the organization needs to find someone who's able to step back, see the big picture for what it is, and address how that change will happen to address the entire big picture. Actually, to that point, I read an article in the Harvard Business Review quite recently, in March, I think, where they talked about large companies that had invested multi-million dollars in digital transformations, which they've had to either stop, put down, or even in some cases led to the CEO being replaced. So the one that surprised me the most, really, because like many people, I associated GE being in the vanguard of digital transformation. They allegedly invented the Internet of Things. They put scanners into their various modules, in the last century and so on, and have been at the vanguard of the digital change. But I was interested to discover that because of the amount they were investing in their digital initiatives and the sort of payback it was getting, they've actually fired their CEO who was driving this digital innovation. Harvard says, because of militant investors not getting the returns that they were seeing. And they've now got somebody who's much more focused on costs, and they've ramped down their digital budget. And that article goes on and, talks about a number of big names: Lego, Procter and Gamble, Nike. All of these big companies have invested millions in their digital innovation, and they've had to scale it back because I think, I agree with the Harvard sort of proposition that those companies hadn't really worked out what they wanted to do with that digital element, whether it would pay back in time, and how it added back into their digital strategy. So that, going back to what I thought was important, it has to tie into your business strategy, and it has to deliver to your current set of stakeholders. So despite these companies having huge deep pockets, throwing the best people at it, huge budgets at it, it still didn't give them the payback that they were hoping for. And I think, in my mind, that is a pitfall, not only of digital transformation, but any transformation really. And therefore, mature organizations like this, which had access to the best minds, best resources, still are able to get it wrong. One thing I guess the digital transformation opportunity does, it democratizes the whole landscape. So you can have new players coming into a market without the huge infrastructure costs, without the huge developmental costs that in a legacy environment you needed. And they're able to capture niches in the market. So if I think about the financial services sector, thinking of operators like PayPal and Alibaba, what they were able to do, in PayPal's case, a small element of the payments market. They made sure they had a really simple proposition that was available to everyone, easy to use, and they focused on that and enhanced it in slow steps. And look at them today. They are a major player in the payment space. Alibaba, I think, took a more location-based strategy, and they focused on the China market. And now through Ant Financial and other things, they're expanding that space. And I saw an article somewhere saying they're now that they would be the 10th largest commercial bank as they seek banking licenses and look to grow their current space. So I think that's two success stories of incumbents who started small, focused on their niche, made sure they got that story right before expanding out. So I think that sort of brings out the difference between huge, large, established players who threw money, resources at the digital problem and perhaps have stumbled along the way, and small players who were able to come in without the legacy costs and focused on a niche, kept their eye on the ball and moved forward and achieved success, at least to date. Well, banking, I suppose, is interesting at 2 or 3 levels. One, of course, within banking, there is the element of trust. We all want to put our money with somebody we trust. And therefore, in the UK, for example, there is great frustration in the media and with some of the newer players that there's not this great rush of money away from the big high street banks. But I think that has to do with the element of trust. And that trust has been won over many, many years by some of these players. And rightly or wrongly, they're perceived as safe havens for our money, and that is very central to what we do. So there's that element. And then there's the second element is there are people who are entering the market. I mentioned PayPal. There are players in the UK market who are coming in and offering services as well. So on the one hand, you have the people who have the trust of the banks. They have the customer base, and they importantly have the data about this customer base, which they're starting to increasingly leverage and take forward. On the other hand, you have the people who don't have those constraints of legacy, but they don't have the trust of the people, and they don't have a great sort of brand reputation. I think the opportunity lies for somebody who gets it right, who focuses on a niche, similar to the way PayPal did, and take that forward. So, for example, I mentioned over the past 3 months, I've been exploring a fintech idea which I think could revolutionize the savings and borrowing space, not only, initially in the UK market, but then globally. And I hope, with the right backing and the right nursing towards the change program. So I'll eat my own dog food, make sure we get the strategy right and take it forward, and watch this space. In my mind, the most crucial phase of any transformation is the planning and getting it right. I'm a Steve Sintek, I think, describes this really well as he talks about his golden circle and moving from the inside out. And the examples he's fond of using is Apple, Martin Luther King, and the Wright brothers. What did they do differently from folks around them? Rather than decide on the what, how, and why in that order, he suggests the right way to do it is to decide on the why, how, and then the what. And getting that right allows us to sell our products differently, conceive them differently, and then figure out the details of the product in order to meet those two cycles. And I think as long as an organization puts things in that order, it sort of ties into what I said earlier about making sure there's buy-in, it fits in with the business strategy. There's enough communication. People will then understand why we're doing what we're doing, buy into it better. And then there's a matter of implementing, which could be done in short, sharp cycles to make sure the profit and loss pays back and other things. But I think the most important thing is conceptualizing it right, making sure you get the top-down buy-in, and then communicating really well.